Welcome back, everyone, for another lecture in the Sequoia Park Zoo's Conservation Lecture Series. Thanks for joining us on Zoom and Facebook Live tonight. It's great to have everybody here. I'm Dr. Ruth Mock, and I'm the Director of Conservation and Research at the Sequoia Park Zoo. I co-chair the zoo's Conservation Advisory Committee, which brings you all of the amazing programs that we were highlighting in that previous slideshow, including the lecture series tonight. This year's Conservation Lecture Series will be held virtually and is sponsored by our friends over at Papa and Barkley. Thanks. And now it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Sequoia Park Zoo's Dr. Christine Damiani. She leads the zoo's butterfly conservation program and also serves on our Conservation Advisory Committee. She earned a Bachelor of Science degree at UC Davis and went on to earn her Ph.D. in zoology at Duke University. She previously worked at U.S. Forest Service Redwood Sciences Lab and the Institute for Wildlife Studies. And for the past decade, she has been involved in Oregon silverspot butterfly conservation through habitat restoration projects, population surveys, and now this very comprehensive captive rearing program, which she's going to be telling us much more about tonight. So thanks for joining us, Chris, and sharing your expertise. We are turning the spotlight over to you now.
Thank you, Ruth, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This is kind of a big night for me because I have been growing butterfly conservation efforts at Sequoia Park Zoo for 6 years, but not many people know that the zoo has actively been involved in conservation for one of our local species, the Oregon silverspot butterfly. So give me a minute to get my slides up and we'll get started. Okay, well, I was supposed to give this talk last spring, and it was going to be the first chance I was going to have to go through all of my photos and data and butterfly home movies and put them all together into a complete story for the public. Unfortunately, my talk did get derailed by COVID, but I'm back tonight over Zoom, and I have even better photos and better home movies and even more to report. So I'm really very eager to finally be able to share this story with you. Our story begins with the Oregon silverspot butterfly, which is a fritillary butterfly that is native to the Pacific Northwest and is named for these gleaming silvery spots on the underside of its wing. The butterfly occurs in open habitats like coastal prairies and dune swales that support a diversity of nectar flowers and large numbers of the early blue violet, Viola adunca, which is the only plant that the caterpillar will eat. Unfortunately, most of these types of habitats have been either grown over by woody plants or paved under by coastal development. Habitat loss and degradation have reduced the Oregon silverspot to 5 populations, 4 in Oregon and 1 in California. The butterfly is listed as federally threatened with a recommendation to be uplisted to endangered. The southernmost population of Oregon silverspot is found in California, near Lake Earl in Norte County. Some of the remaining suitable habitat for the Del Norte population is protected in Tolowa Dunes State Park. And the rest is found in an area called Pacific Shores, which is former ranching land that had been subdivided in the 60s as part of a housing development, but was never able to be developed because it occurs on sensitive dune and wetland habitat. So the butterfly habitat is there, but it has been badly degraded by invasive plants and illegal dumping. Currently, the Coastal Conservancy and the Smith River Alliance are working to try to buy back some of these lots so that they can be restored and returned to the state as part of the Lake Earl Wildlife Area. One of the ways that Sequoia Park Zoo contributes to the recovery of the Oregon silverspot is we co-organize an annual event called the Scotch Broom Bash, where we drive up to Lake Earl and we spend the day with the Tolowa Dune stewards, removing invasive Scotch broom to open up prairie habitats so that butterfly host and nectar plants have a chance to reestablish. In the past 6 years, we have removed at least 200 cubic yards of Scotch broom from Pacific shores. And the only reason that this number isn't higher is we've had such enthusiastic community participation that we have removed almost all of the large broom plants from the publicly owned lots. However, we will continue to remove broom from lots as they become publicly available. And in the meantime, it's also important for us to go back and remove seedlings that resprout in the lots that we've already cleared. In the past few years, it's been exciting to see some of the roads removed from Pacific shores and some of the habitat restoration started. However, habitat restoration is a long and tricky process, and it can take many years to figure out how to encourage native plant communities to return without also creating conditions for invasive plants to outcompete them. And in the meantime, the Oregon silverspot population continues to decline. So the problem with habitat fragmentation is that small patches of habitat support small populations of butterflies, and small populations are vulnerable to catastrophes like disease or even a year of bad weather. This graph shows the Oregon silverspot population trend in Del Norte County since 2005. And it's important for me to point out that these numbers are not actual population size, because population size is very difficult to quantify for butterflies. Instead, this is a population index, which is based on the numbers of adults that are cited every year on a standardized transect. So not population size, but still gives us an idea of what the population is doing. And we can see that about 10 years ago, the population was doing pretty well. In fact, it was one of the strongest of the 5 remaining populations. However, it was in decline, and in 2016, we had a heavy rain year. Lake Earl flooded, presumably drowning all of the caterpillars in the surrounding violet habitat. You can see in 2016 that the population index dropped below 100 individuals. And at this point, it makes it very difficult for individuals to find mates on their own, which contributes to this downward spiral towards local population extinction. So, if we want to prevent the Oregon silverspot from going extinct in California, it now becomes critical not only to restore the habitat, but also to stabilize that population until the habitat can recover. And this is where zoos can be helpful. For over a decade, the Oregon and Woodland Park zoos have been stabilizing butterfly populations in Oregon by releasing captive reared individuals into the wild while their habitats are being restored. However, Portland and Seattle are quite far from Del Norte County. And so in 2018, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service approached Sequoia Park Zoo about establishing a similar captive rearing facility in California. Our goal for our pilot year in 2018 was to set up a butterfly rearing facility at the zoo and to practice rearing 2 butterfly species that were related to the Oregon silverspot, but not threatened or endangered. And these were the Hydaspes fritillary and the Zerine fritillary. We were to demonstrate that we could collect eggs from wild-caught females, hatch them, and then raise the caterpillars to the pupa or chrysalis stage using protocols developed by the Oregon Zoo. So this is our little butterfly rearing laboratory located at the zoo in the barnyard. And this is where the magic happens. There's not much magic happening there right now because it's winter, but if you would like to see our resident butterfly biologists at work, the best times to visit are spring to early fall. In August 2018, we received 14 butterflies from the Fish and Wildlife Service that had been collected in eastern Humboldt County. Of these 14 butterflies, 5 were females that laid eggs. One of these was a Zerine fritillary, and the other 4 were Hydaspes fritillaries. Our butterflies are housed in paper bags, and this is what it looks like inside one of those bags. You can see that every butterfly gets a pile of paper towel strips, which simulate the grass that the butterflies lay their eggs on in the wild. They also get a damp piece of shop towel, which serves as a drinking pad, and a violet leaf, which we put in there because it's thought that the smell of violets encourages the butterflies to lay eggs. Twice a day, we feed the butterflies using a cotton swab that is soaked in an artificial nectar. And this is one of my butterfly home movies of a butterfly laying an egg in her bag. So keep watching the tip of her abdomen and you will see her place a small egg right underneath the paper towel strip. She just did it. We're going to change the camera angle here so you can get a better look at that egg. And there it is. Every day we hunt through all of those paper towel strips to look for the eggs, and it looks something like this. I don't know if you're going to be able to see my pointer, but down at the bottom here, there is a bonanza of eggs that are laid on this paper towel strip. Usually they will lay them either singly or in small clusters on the paper towel strips, but we do have one on the violet leaf. Sometimes they'll lay them on the sides of the bag and even on the drinking pad. So in this photo, there's probably about 20 butterfly eggs here. When we find eggs, we snip off the piece of paper towel that has the egg on it, place it on a piece of moistened filter paper in a petri dish, and then we monitor those eggs until they hatch. By October, our 5 females had laid 371 eggs. We monitor the eggs every day under a dissecting scope so that we can remove eggs that are either dead or moldy, and also to track their development. And as you can see, butterfly eggs are incredibly beautiful when viewed up close. Not many people get to see this. In the first day or 2 after they're laid, they are pale yellow. And if they've been fertilized, they will start to darken until they turn into these exquisite little jewels of iridescent purple and gold scales. And then the color will clear out and you can start to see the caterpillar forming inside the egg. So in picture number 4, this dark spot at the apex of the egg is the caterpillar's head forming. And then the caterpillar will eat its way out of the eggshell. This whole process of hatching takes about 5 minutes, and I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but after the caterpillar eats a hole in the eggshell and wriggles its way out, it will then turn around and consume the rest of the eggshell, which is the only nutrition that will sustain this caterpillar through the winter. And here is our newborn little fuzzy baby caterpillar. In our pilot year, we had a hatch rate of 28%, resulting in 104 caterpillars. In the wild, after the caterpillars hatch, they enter a sort of insect hibernation called diapause, which delays their development so they don't have to expend as much energy and they don't have to eat until spring when the violets come back up again. To prepare our caterpillars for diapause, we give them these little pieces of corrugated cardboard that the zookeepers in Oregon have named yurts. And you can see the caterpillars fit very nicely into those little corrugations. So these pieces of cardboard keep them nice and protected during the winter. We place the yurts in special tubes that suspend the caterpillars over water in mason jars, and this keeps them from drying out. The jars are then placed in a refrigerator over the winter. I check the jars once a month to replace moldy yurts and to remove any dead caterpillars. When I do these checks, it's important that the caterpillars don't get too warm, or they might come out of diapause and expend too much of their fat reserves before the winter is over. So these checks are done in an unheated shed on winter mornings. It's a chilly job. I've had to invest in some good thermal underwear. 64 caterpillars survived the winter, and I brought them out of diapause in early May. The caterpillars go back to the lab in the barnyard, and they are housed in jars, deli cups, or plastic bins, depending on what stage they're in and how big they are. Throughout the spring, the caterpillars go through 6 molts before they pupate, and the stage between molts is called an instar. So as you can see from this series of photos, the caterpillars grow a lot between molts, and they also eat a lot. To keep our caterpillars fed, we maintain an in-house supply of potted violets, which are harvested 3 to 5 times each week by volunteers. And by the end of June or early July, the caterpillars will stop eating and they'll find a place to hang on the sides of their bins, where they will form this J shape, shed their skin, and become a pupa. And this process is fascinating. At this stage, the caterpillar will release enzymes that basically digest its own muscles and digestive system. And then little packages of cells called imaginal discs will use the proteins from this caterpillar soup to grow the parts of the adult butterfly. And this all happens in about 2 to 3 weeks. we ended up with 30 pupae. So we have now raised our butterflies from egg to pupa, and I think we're in the home stretch. Little did I know that the biggest challenge by far of this entire process is releasing those pupae into the wild. The ideal design for a release cage is, of course, to put the pupae in a closed cage that protects them from predators, and then come every day to check on the pupae and release any metamorphosed butterflies. However, because our release sites are over an hour away, neither the zoo nor the Fish and Wildlife Service has the staff to send someone out every day to check on butterflies, as lovely as that job would be. So we had to go with a self-release cage design. And this is what we came up with based on what they were doing in Oregon. We placed the pupae in these paper towel cones called pupae pockets. And then we taped the pupae pockets up towards the top of an inverted bucket. So this is an ice cream bucket that I upcycled from the zoo cafe, and it protects the pupae from rain. And then we also hope that if we tape the pupae up towards the top, it will also protect them or keep them out of the reach from little predators. The buckets are placed in a mesh butterfly cage with the door unzipped a few inches so that the butterflies can get out. Outside the cage, we stake a bouquet of nectar flowers with the idea that when the butterflies emerge from their pupal cases or eclose, they will head towards the flowers, find the door, and release themselves. We placed our release cages in 3 locations in eastern Humboldt County: Clear Lake, Grouse Mountain, and Willow Creek. And each of these sites had their own unique challenges. Willow Creek was extremely hot, and high temperatures resulted in complete mortality of all the pupae in the Willow Creek cage, unfortunately. At Clear Lake, a small unknown predator was able to slip into the cage, reach the pupae pockets, and chew through them, and consumed all of the pupae in that cage except for one, which did metamorphose into a butterfly. At Grouse Mountain, we had problems with a large pest who vandalized the cages so badly that the butterflies couldn't get out after they eclosed. I did suspect that this culprit was a bear, but when I put a trail camera out, this is what I found. Cows. A diabolical herd of cows that came almost every night to play with this interesting toy that some human had left in their meadow. My colleagues in the barnyard think this is hilarious. But despite the cows, I was able to release 7 butterflies from the Grouse Mountain cage, resulting in a total of 8 successful releases. I'm not going to lie, the mortalities at this release stage were heartbreaking because at this point, these were my babies and I had spent an entire year raising them. So this was very sad, but there was a bright spot in the season. One day I went to check on the Grouse Mountain cage and I found 4 butterflies that were trapped inside because the cows had zipped the door shut, but they were still alive. So within minutes of releasing them, 1 butterfly flew away and 3 had attracted mates. So get ready for a racy video. This female, who's on the bottom, was mated within half an hour of being released. And this is awesome because the whole point of this year-long process is to release individuals who will contribute to future generations of butterflies in the wild. And this shows that we can do it. So clearly there is room for improvement, but I would say that our pilot year was successful because we did succeed in raising at least some butterflies all the way through their entire life cycle, released them into the wild, and got visual confirmation that they were mated. Still, I do understand that some people will look at this graph and think, well, that was a lot of time and resources for 8 butterflies. And, maybe the Oregon silverspot's a lost cause, so maybe you should just let it go. Let me try to justify to you why this work is worth the time and resources and why we should not just let it go. So, although the primary focus in insect conservation is on bees, because bees are very efficient pollinators and they have the most direct benefit to humans because they pollinate our food crops. I would argue that butterflies are also important because they pollinate bee food crops. I took this photograph at Pacific Shores, and although tansy ragwort is not people's most favorite plant, it does illustrate that pollinators help pollinators because they share and pollinate the same nectar plants. I have observed Oregon silverspots nectaring on yarrow, goldenrod, and asters, all of which are plants that are commonly used by bees. So I would maintain that supporting butterflies and their habitats is important because it provides bees with a healthy and resilient food resource and also an alternate to agricultural ecosystems that may be contaminated with pesticides. And clearly, pollinators need our help. These graphs are analyses of long-term butterfly monitoring studies that have been conducted in the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, and the United States. And they all show a 30 to 40% decline in butterfly abundance in the past 20 to 40 years. And these aren't just the rare species. Some of the studies show that even common generalist butterflies, like the cabbage white, are also in decline. And this bottom graph, which has data from 452 species of insects from all continents, show a 35% decline in butterflies and a 45% global decline in insects in general. So if we were to lose the Oregon silverspot, the next butterfly that we're going to have to help is the Behren silverspot in Mendocino County. And if we were to lose that one, there will be another species and another species and another species that will require our intervention. So unless we can reverse the effects of climate change and habitat fragmentation that threaten butterfly habitats, these techniques, these captive rearing techniques that we are learning and perfecting today will be needed in the future if we want to keep pollinators with us. So, what's next for us? Well, we have now completed our second year of captive rearing, and we are halfway through our third. And I'm happy to report that our success rates have improved. In the pilot year, we collected slightly fewer than 400 eggs. This past fall, we collected over 2,000 eggs. Our 2020 hatch rates are not as good as our 2019, but overall, we have improved our hatch rates, winter survival, and our release rates since the pilot year. The release cages continue to be a challenge, but I'm learning a lot every year. For instance, this year I learned that yes, bears as well as cows do like to mess with the release cages. And remember that small mystery predator that took out almost an entire cage of pupae at Clear Lake? It turns out that was a grasshopper, which I did not expect. So as I learn more, I am constantly evolving the release cages to minimize the adverse effects of small animals, large animals, temperature, and humidity. And this is my latest version. It's a hanging bucket hung out of the reach of bears and cows, and it has the bouquet of flowers strapped to the front next to a small opening for the butterflies to release themselves. We've also got a mesh tunnel that is attached in front of that opening, which hopefully will deter birds from just flying into the bucket and snacking down on butterflies. Inside the bucket, we now have the pupae pockets clipped to little clotheslines, which give the butterflies a place to hang upside down after they eclose, which allows them to more properly expand and dry their wings. We also have a couple of damp sponges at the bottom of the bucket, which elevate the humidity so that the pupae are less likely to desiccate in warm weather. I am sad to report that the status of the Oregon silverspot in California has not improved in the past 2 years. In fact, no butterflies were sighted on the transect this summer. So I can't even say for certain that there are still Oregon silverspots left in California. What I can say for certain is Sequoia Park Zoo is ready and capable of assisting the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in any capacity that were needed to help out with the recovery of the Oregon silverspot, whether that be augmenting the existing population with captive reared individuals or reintroducing butterflies after the habitat's been restored if it turns out this population has been extirpated. We are also in the process of applying for our recovery permit to work with the Behen's silverspot butterfly, which is a closely related endangered species that occurs in Sonoma and Mendocino counties near Point Arena. Not much is known about this population except that it is small. So we're really hoping that we can apply the techniques that we've learned to try to boost its numbers before this species also suffers a catastrophe. And finally, we will be doing some research this spring to ask if this invasive dandelion, which many of us have in our yards, distracts caterpillars from finding the violets that they need to grow and develop into pupae. The answers to this research will help managers know how concerned they need to be about eradicating this very common weed if they are trying to restore butterfly habitat. So as you can see, our little zoo is involved in quite a few butterfly conservation projects. If I've inspired you to also want to be involved, we do have a couple of volunteer opportunities that I hope will be available in the spring, but it is of course contingent on COVID. But you could join our next Scotch Broom Bash. They happen in March or April, and it's an all-day event, family friendly. We provide the transportation from Arcata to Lake Earl, tools, gloves, really good snacks. And it's just a lovely way to spend the day meeting new and interesting people while restoring butterfly habitat. Our second opportunity is to join our violet harvesting team. We go through about 600 leaves every week in the spring, and it can take hours to harvest enough leaves to feed our caterpillars. So we're always happy to have some extra help, and it's a flexible volunteer schedule, and I usually conduct a training workshop in April. And if you're the type of person who likes to help out by contributing money instead of time, you could do that too. Although the Butterfly Conservation Program is a zoo program, we are run completely independently from the regular zoo budget. So we are entirely funded by grants and donations. So if you would like to donate, you can do that through Sequoia Park Zoo's website. And then you just in the comment box write that you want that donation to go to the Butterfly Conservation Program. And if you would like any more information about these volunteer opportunities or the program in general, or if you want to volunteer, you can email me at longicarpus@yahoo.com. So I want to end by giving you another couple things that you can do that won't necessarily help Oregon silverspots, but will help butterflies in general. The first thing is, if you are lucky enough to have your own garden or yard, you can plant butterfly host and nectar plants. You have to do your research first and plant things that are native to your area. I know that a lot of people like to plant milkweeds to help monarchs because milkweeds are the host plant for the monarch butterfly or the monarch caterpillar. However, neither milkweeds nor monarchs have historically been found in coastal Humboldt County. So well-meaning monarch lovers who plant milkweeds here may actually be creating an ecological trap that lures monarchs who should just be passing through our area on the way to their breeding grounds to instead lay their eggs here on the coast, where conditions may not favor the survival of their offspring. Planting nectar plants is always a good thing for resident and migratory butterflies, as well as other pollinators. If you plant nectar plants, you want to plant a variety so that there is always something blooming and providing much needed nutrition for the entire flight season. And again, you want to try to plant things that are native to your area. So for example, butterflies love butterfly bush, but it's kind of invasive. So don't plant that. Instead, go to one of these websites, pollinator.org or nwf.org. You can enter your zip code and you will receive a plant list that is specific to your area. And if you live in Humboldt County, you can visit us at the zoo, and we have this demonstration pollinator garden that was funded by the Fish and Wildlife Service and provides examples of some of our local pollinator plants and what they might look like in your yard. And if you care about monarchs, which have declined 99% in the past 40 years, you need to add Mexican avocados to the list of things you should not buy. Avocados have become such a lucrative crop in Mexico that farmers are now deforesting the wintering grounds of the monarch butterfly in order to plant more avocado orchards. Some of this deforestation is illegal, and this past January, a butterfly conservationist and local community leader who was running a monarch reserve and fighting to protect the monarch groves was murdered. So don't give them financial incentive to do things like that. Eat local, choose California avocados, and if you must eat avocados in winter, choose these ones with the sticker that says equal exchange. These are the avocados that are grown on the older plantations, so they're not contributing to additional deforestation. And these farmers have committed to growing their avocados organically and sustainably. So before I let you go, I have some people I want to thank. There are several agencies that are involved in the recovery of the Oregon silverspot, but the ones that we work with most closely are the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Arcata office, who are funding the captive rearing and also the dandelion experiment. The Oregon Zoo, who have provided me with so much guidance and encouragement while I was learning how to captive rear butterflies. And the Tolowa Dune Stewards, who help us to organize the Scotch Broom Bash, along with the Fish and Wildlife Service. I want to give a special shout out to Clint Pogue, Gary Falksa, and Susie Therrett, who all at one point in time or another have been my colleagues and points of contact at the Fish and Wildlife Service, and have provided me with an immense amount of guidance and support while I was developing these butterfly conservation projects. I would also like to thank the staff at Sequoia Park Zoo. This is a small zoo, and it takes a bit of squeezing and rearranging to add the facilities for a new program. But our director, Gretchen Ziegler, has been supportive of butterfly conservation from the start, and the rest of the wonderful staff here have done what needs to be done to make this happen. So I'm really very grateful. I would also like to thank my wonderful lab assistants, donors, and volunteers. And lastly, I would just like to thank all of you. I think this is a great example of some of the conservation work that Sequoia Park Zoo does in our community, but we could not do it without you. You guys step up, you donate money, you show up to learn about butterflies, you sacrifice your weekends to pull invasive plants. I think you guys are awesome, and I think the whole conservation committee just really appreciates your passion and your support for the zoo. So thank you again for joining us from your homes, and stay safe, stay healthy, mask up, and I really hope that we can all get together in person for next year's conservation lecture series. So I think that's it. And Ruth, if anyone has submitted questions, I can try to answer them now.
Okay. Fantastic talk and information, Dr. Damiani. Thanks so much. We are all brimming with follow-up questions. I'm going to share some of the questions with Chris from our Zoom chat and Facebook Live comments. As a reminder, the lecture series is made possible thanks to sponsorship from Papa and Barkley, and our other conservation programs would not be possible without your help. So we just want to thank you guys again for donating tonight. I'm going to get to the questions. We have several. All right, so this is coming from Facebook. San Antonio Zoo asks, how do wildfire cycles affect the population management of butterflies on the West Coast?
I can't speak to all butterflies on the West Coast, but I think historically there was fire that kept those meadows short. And now with, people living there, and there's not, that fire is not happening anymore. So I think that is part of the reason that the vegetation has grown higher, and there are more trees and more bushes, which are kind of crowding out those meadows. I think I'm not the one involved in the habitat restoration. I think that some of those groups are using fire or experimenting with fire, but that's an area that I'm not as familiar with.
Yeah, and we are lucky that we're coastal, so we don't have fires hitting all the way on the coast where Dr. Damiani's been doing that restoration work as well. Um, all right, we have another question from Facebook. Susan asks, did the original 5 female butterflies die after laying eggs?
Yes. So we receive the butterflies. It's usually towards the end of their life. And so we keep them at the zoo, and we collect their eggs as we lay them, but we take care of them until they die. So all of the butterflies that we receive die at the zoo.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Carol. Do Oregon silverspot butterflies lay their eggs on grass, as do the fritillarias you captive reared, or do they lay them on the violet plants?
That's kind of hard to know because hardly anyone has watched butterflies laying their eggs in the wild. Although I actually have tried to. That was one of the first projects that I did with the Fish and Wildlife Service, was I was trying to figure out exactly what cues they were honing in on to lay their eggs. So I would follow female butterflies, and you could tell a pregnant female butterfly because she would be really fat and flying really low to the ground. And so I would follow her until she landed and try to see where she laid her eggs. But at Pacific Shores, where I was working, part of this no fire is that usually if there was fire, it would burn out all of the dead grasses. But because there is no fire out there, there is a really thick layer of thatch, which is just this really thick layer of dead leaves and sedges and grasses. And so usually I would find that the butterfly would land and she would crawl underneath all of that. And then I couldn't see her anymore. So I never saw exactly where she laid her eggs. After she finished what she was doing and left, I would kind of take a peek, and I couldn't find anything because I didn't really know what I was looking for at that point. But there were always violets nearby. I don't know if they actually, I think they don't actually always lay them on the violets. They're attracted to the violets, and then I think they'll just lay them anywhere nearby, because once they lay their eggs and the caterpillars hatch, the caterpillars can crawl to the violets as long as the violets aren't too far away.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Ken. Excellent presentation and fantastic work. Would it be practical to transplant adults from Oregon to the Del Norte site?
So there is, there have been genetic studies. There's the issue of not wanting to transport individuals that are like really genetically different. But if it came down to there were no more Del Norte butterflies, I would think that they would reintroduce from Oregon. And there's one population, it's the southernmost of the Oregon populations, Rock Creek, and that one has some distant genetic similarities to the Del Norte population. But otherwise, the Del Norte population is very genetically distinct from the Oregon populations, which makes sense because it's the farthest away. But that's one of the reasons that we would really like to save this population if we can, because it does have a unique gene pool.
And Jacob asks, did the pandemic cause any significant decrease in volunteer efforts?
Yes. This year, because of the pandemic, we actually couldn't have our volunteer violet harvesting program. So me and 2 assistants had to harvest all the violets by ourselves. And I have spent countless hours, countless nights staying up until 2 o'clock in the morning harvesting violets so that I can feed the butterflies the next day. So the pandemic certainly did impact us.
You're a rock star. Sarah asks, I'm curious about the status of early blue violets. Do you recommend planting them for habitat? Is there a good local nursery to purchase them from?
I think early blue violets are pretty common. Oregon silver spots are not found here. They're further up near Crescent City, so planting them in Arcata or Eureka isn't really going to help the population. But they are a nice plant. I think if you wanted a nursery for them, we get them from the Mattole. It's bad that I've forgotten their name. The Mattole Restoration Council, I think it's called. I don't know if they sell retail. They might just be wholesale. But I think you might also be able to get them at Samara.
Okay, great. We have a question. What is the difference between a butterfly and a moth?
Oh, well, they are, gosh, I should know this. They are in different taxonomic groups, and primarily moths fly in the nighttime and butterflies fly in the daytime. They usually utilize different types of nectar plants, and when the moth caterpillars usually form a different kind. So not my Oregon silver spots, but my caterpillars formed that pupa or chrysalis, which was kind of that smooth, kind of pointed at one end kind of structure. And the moth caterpillars will form a cocoon, which are usually kind of fuzzy and webby. So they're a little bit different.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. We also have a question from Matthew. Given the limited range and habitat of this subspecies, was it always historically rare? If not, what are the main causes of its rarity?
I think it was not historically this rare. Its range was along the coast all the way from southern Washington to northern California. But the places where these butterflies live, these coastal meadows right by the beach, it's the same places that people want to live. And so so much of the habitat has become housing developments. And with housing developments, not only do you have that loss of land, but probably people are spraying pesticides, and they're taking up places that used to have nectar plants and maybe instead growing vegetables or lawns. So there's the lack of space, but there's also the lack of food, and then there's the introduction of poisons. There's roads. So if butterflies have their habitats fragmented by roads and they're trying to cross the road, they may be hit. So it's mainly habitat loss and degradation that I think have really reduced the numbers of this butterfly. But I think now habitat or climate change and disease are probably also major threats.
Thank you. And Anne had a similar question. So if that didn't answer your question, Anne, just let us know and we will ask. Um, we have another question from Jacob. Would you say that doing this kind of effort with butterflies is harder than with a larger animal, mammals or birds?
Would I say it's harder? I can't really make the comparison because I've never done this kind of work with larger animals. Certainly, you know, I can produce more of those individuals in a smaller space than, say, if we were working with elephants. So I don't know, it may actually be easier.
That's a great answer. And I think sometimes the attention that larger animals get can sometimes make efforts get more funding for those types of species.
That's
But
true.
obviously, just as important. Okay, and we have another question about the types of butterflies that we have here in Humboldt. Do we what are the more common species that we might see around maybe in Eureka or Arcata?
Well, we've got swallowtail butterflies, are those really big yellow and black butterflies. We've got little skippers, which are tiny little kind of velvety brown and orange ones that you might not notice. We've got blue butterflies, which are kind of like also small butterflies that are kind of silvery. And then we've got some big black ones that are California sisters. We probably have admirals and painted ladies.
All right, well, thanks, Chris. I think that was our last question.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thanks for sharing your research and knowledge with us. We really look forward to hearing about the long-term impact of this project and the great work that you're going to continue doing for our native pollinators.
Thank you.